Mornington in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne is no stranger to railways. It first had a rail connection in 1889, when a branch line was built from Baxter, then called Mornington Junction, after the main line was extended from Frankston in 1882. This line carried passenger and goods trains quite successfully for several decades. By 1905, Mornington Station saw around 7,900 passenger journeys and over 2,400 tonnes of goods. Then, after the Frankston line was electrified in 1922, some called for the Victorian Railways to also electrify the branch to Mornington. However, the government rejected this idea on the grounds of cost. This didn't stop local residents though, who continued to advocate for this to happen, with a local group called the Mornington Electrification Committee even proposing a further rail extension to Dromana or even further. This went back and forth over many years, with the issue being raised repeatedly by residents and equally rejected repeatedly by authorities. Then in 1950, the Public Works Committee held hearings on its report about transport infrastructure in Victoria. Amongst many other things, it looked at this old chestnut of electrification, which they were probably sick of hearing about by now. What they ended up recommending though was something completely new. And this is the unbuilt railway that we're going to talk about in this video. The idea was to build a brand new railway to Mornington from Frankston on a more direct route than the existing one. Rather than the line to Baxter, which turns west at Frankston, this new line would instead go south via Mount Eliza, branching off the main line at Hastings Road, right where Frankston Hospital is today. It would have continued south to the shopping strip on the corner of Overport Road and Ewell Street, before turning slightly and heading southwest, winding its way through the hilly residential areas. It would meet the Nepean Highway to run alongside it just after Humphreys Road, and would have then continued through Mount Eliza, crossing what was then called Boundary Road, which is today called Canadian Bay Road, and then continuing across Gunyong Creek and Sunnyside Road. Finally, it would have approached Mornington along what is today the Nepean Highway, before joining the existing railway just past Tanti Avenue for the last 100 metres into Mornington itself. The route had several alternative alignments, and was later revised to be more direct south of Overport Road, heading further south instead of west to avoid impacts on the local school. It would have then continued from here as per the previous proposal. The committee's main reasoning for this was that it would be much shorter than the existing line, which would then improve the speed and reliability of services and make it more attractive for people to use. It would also service the population growth in the area and reduce congestion on the Nepean Highway. One of the other reasons for the more direct route was that it would improve the viability of the railway. The existing line to Mornington via Baxter was long and indirect, making the rapidly proliferating motorcar a much quicker and more attractive option. There was also little development along this meandering route, which meant that there wasn't much demand, and the closure of passenger services on the Mornington line during the Second World War put a further dent in its usefulness. After their report was published, two of the three local councils, Hastings and Frankston Shires, were quick to announce their opposition, claiming that the money could be better spent on water supply for some reason. Curiously, in the same breath, they also said that they didn't oppose electrifying the existing line, which would presumably also cost money not being spent on water supply, and that they also supported a further extension to Dromana. The Shires also opposed it on the grounds that the railway would affect the local golf course, run too close to the Frankston Hospital, and, most horrifying of all, bring trains into, quote, the most exclusive suburban area in the Shire, and they couldn't possibly have that. Another opponent of the project was the Victorian Railways itself. It did not agree with a new line and fought back hard against the proposal. In an era when they were experiencing severe financial difficulties caused by years of deferred maintenance, decreasing demand and funding cuts, the last thing that they wanted to do was spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a brand new electric railway. And in a further disappointment to locals, not only did they oppose the new railway, but they also refused to reintroduce trains on the existing Mornington line, which had lost its passenger service during the Second World War. Unsurprisingly, the third council involved, Mornington Shire, was pretty happy about getting a second railway to their town, and supported it wholeheartedly. They also later called their opponents further north and west, quote, selfish. And so years went by stuck in this stalemate. There was even a minor scandal when some houses were allowed to be built on land that was meant to be reserved for the railway but never acquired. By 1956, Arthur Warner, the Minister for Transport, told a parliamentary committee that building the new railway was not scheduled for at least 6 to 7 years. And in the same year, the Victorian Railways announced that it was deferring a long list of new and upgraded infrastructure projects, including the Frankston to Mornington Railway. Mornington Shire did end up reserving the land required that was within their boundaries, but it didn't seem to make much difference. Finally, in 1962, the Frankston to Mornington Railway, together with the East Preston and Beaumaris lines that we've talked about before, were officially cancelled when the land reservations were removed from the planning scheme. In a bid to help compensate for this loss, in 1967, the state government reintroduced limited passenger service to the existing Mornington Railway from Baxter, and it continued to operate until the Loney Report. The proposed electrification along the old route even came back into official government policy when it was again proposed in the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan. But nothing was ever done to enact this, and the line was finally closed to revenue passenger and goods traffic in 1981. It then reopened as the Mornington Tourist Railway in 1999, after many years of preparation and restoration. Since then, it's operated successfully as a heritage railway with some cool rolling stock and infrastructure if you're interested, including this footbridge from the former Fitzroy branch line that I've covered in a previous video. The station site itself was sold for development and replaced by a shopping centre. Interestingly, when Peninsula Link was built, they included an overpass for the now disused railway, and even built an at-grade pedestrian crossing. I think this was probably intended for a potential extension of the Heritage Railway to Baxter, but in theory it could also be used if regular services were ever reintroduced. And if you're after more details on the full history of the Mornington Railway, check out Metro Man Melbourne's video here, which gives a very good overview. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this and would like to see more, please subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date on future videos. Also, please consider signing up to my supporters portal over at members.philipmallis.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.